All right. It's 11:30 and I'm starting my video. There we go. I guess let's get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being nimble enough to adapt and join us on Zoom. We had to go virtual for this one because COVID is back. My name is Wolf Brack. I'm the artistic director for the Interurban Art House in Overland Park, Kansas. If you aren't familiar with us, we're a 501c3 arts organization that provides affordable artist studio space. We have gallery space, performance space. We work towards increasing business acumen for artists, as much arts advocacy and support as we can give in the Johnson County and Kansas City metro area in general. As you know, today we're here to talk about some of the grant opportunities that are available in our area. But before that, a little bit of housekeeping. He said this is all being recorded. I ask everyone to stay on mute unless they are asking a question. Each presenter will have about 15 minutes to present, and then we'll have about 5 minutes after each presenter for you to ask your questions. Also, we would like your feedback about what you need as far as grants, funding, support. You can pop that in the chat. We just need to, we all want to know, what is it that you're needing? What is it that you're not seeing? Or what is it that you may not be sure about, or if something wasn't answered in one of the presentations. Bear with me here. Got a lot of tabs open. So today we're joined by four organizations, or folks from four different organizations. We have, sorry. We have Allison and Sarah from the Arts Council of Johnson County. We have Amy Kligman from Charlotte Street Foundation. We have Tara Corain from Arts KC. And we'll be joined a little later by Lanita Cook from the Kansas Creative Arts Industry Commission. She'll pop on here around noon. Again, if you have questions, save it for the end of each person's presentation, or you can pop it in the chat and we'll try and make sure to keep up with them. So I guess without further ado, I'll turn it over to Allison and Sarah.
Yay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Interurban Art House, for inviting the Arts Council of Johnson County to be a part of this morning's workshop. My name is Sarah Van Landite. I'm the Executive Director for the Arts Council of Johnson County, and with me is Allison Bowman. She's our Administrative Assistant, and together we're going to kind of tag team and share about an upcoming grant program for you. So we're going to share some context of how we got to where we are and some of what we do know, but we're also going to be very clear that we don't know some stuff yet because we're kind of building the ship as it's flying through the air. So we'll answer whatever we can, but also happy to follow up with questions once we have more information. So I'm going to talk about our Johnson County COVID Recovery Fund for artists and nonprofit arts organizations. We'll speak to artists that's our audience this morning. This is a new grant program that we expect to launch later this spring. It is funded by Federal American Rescue Plan, or ARP funds, that came through Johnson County government. To provide a little context, ARP funds were signed into law in March of 2021. We formed an advisory committee of artists, advocates, Arts Council board members, and arts organization representatives to tell us, where are the needs in Johnson County? Who has COVID impacted that we can support with this funding? And from that, we developed a proposal that then we took to Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. And this was done in partnership with Interurban Art House, the JCPRD Culture Division, and Emporia State University. And we're really excited to share that the BOCC approved the funds earlier this month. So now we have the green light, we can start building and implementing the grant program. So the outline of the program, as I mentioned, was initially developed by our advisory committee. And then about a year ago, I think some of you were able to participate in our community forums, and we took our proposal to the arts sector and we said, artists, arts organizations, community members, art therapists, is what we're proposing on the right track? What are we missing? What needs revised? Who's not at the table? Who should be included? And we took all of your feedback, so thank you very much, revised our proposal, and then that's how we got to the programs that were approved, including the grant program for artists. So we're really grateful to the county commissioners for saying yes and investing this money in our sector's recovery. The way the money works is we have the approval, and I'm providing you with a lot of context that you probably don't really need to know, but I just want to be transparent about this whole process since we're kind of building it. The way the funding works is like a lot of federal grant programs, we spend the money, we turn in receipts to the county, including the grants when they're open, and then we're reimbursed. So the total amount that we were awarded for the grant programs is around $884,000. We don't have that sitting in our bank account. We have to show that we spent it, and then we'll get it back. So what we're doing right now is currently signing agreements with the county government. We're learning more about the reporting process that we'll have to adhere to so that we make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and that we're presenting a program that makes sense for everybody, and that we don't, get ourselves into trouble with the federal government, because that would not be fun. So what we're thinking is that we'll be able to launch our program probably in May. The idea will be to hold several additional workshops specifically for the recovery grant program for artists, hire a contracted grants manager to help us with the project, and some local artists to assist with graphic design for marketing and things like that. That's kind of the context of how we're getting to the grant program. And now I'm going to turn over to Allison, and she's going to share a little bit more about what we do know as it pertains specifically to the grant program for artists.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for giving us the context. My name is Allison Bowman. I'm the administrative assistant for the Arts Council of Johnson County. And I'm going to go over some things that we do know about the grant program. We do know that we will be awarding individual artist grants as well as nonprofit arts organization grants. The individual artist grants are up to $7,500, and the nonprofit arts organization grants are up to $10,000. Eligible artists who can receive funding must live or work in Johnson County, Kansas. And the main goal of this application is for artists to demonstrate financial loss from the pandemic. So to do that, when you apply, you must demonstrate with documentation upfront a loss of at least 15% when comparing your 2019 gross revenue to your 2021 gross revenue. And we came up with that 15% number. It's not just an arbitrary random number. We conducted a survey a couple of years ago or a year ago for artists, and they reported at least a 15% revenue lost in 2021. So that's where we got that 15%. When you apply, you must be able to provide a W-9 and a social security number or individual taxpayer identification number. The grant funds can be used to cover income loss, purchase supplies and equipment, and help with rent, utilities, mortgage, etc. So essentially, it's a recovery grant. It's not a grant to fund future projects. Talking about the CARES Act grants that we did in 2020, 44 artists received CARES Act grant funding totaling $135,000 in 2020. And this year in 2023, we anticipate the number of artists to receive grants as well as the individual grant amounts to double. We do know that there will be final reporting requirements from awarded artists. And these final reports can be written submissions or video submissions by the artist. But at this time, we are unsure if there will be any further need for documentation in the final report. So that's kind of what we do know. What we are anticipating about how the program will work. Again, we anticipate that the grant process will be similar to the COVID relief grants for artists in 2020, if you're familiar with that. And then our goal for this grant process is not to be competitive, and it's to get grant awards to artists who need support. So to do that, the grant applications are not going to be reviewed on a first come, first served basis. The applications will be reviewed by a panel of your peers, comprised of creative industries professionals in the community, which we anticipate using a blind review process. So panelists will not know the applicant's name. And the review process is anticipated again to be similar to that in 2020, where the applications were reviewed and weighed on a numeric scale and were based on financial need. We do know that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted low-income families and communities of color, as well as exacerbated systemic health, economic, and social inequities. So to ensure an equitable distribution of funds, the grant process prioritizes artists of color, Native and Indigenous artists, immigrant artists, female and non-binary artists, artists with disabilities, LGBTQIAP+ artists, and active military or veteran artists. And as we learn more about this program and how it will function, we will keep you updated. We highly encourage you to sign up for our email newsletter to stay up to date. And we will let you know as things progress, as well as when workshops are scheduled. And then information will also be available on our website, which is artsjoco.org. And I am going to put the link to our email sign up in the chat. And then you can just click art/artist calls as the one you want to sign up for, and you'll receive all those emails. So yeah, does anybody have any questions with all that information that we just gave you? You're welcome to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or however you want to do it. Clarissa.
Hi there. So quick question. When you mentioned income, how many years back are we needing to go? Because what if 2020 ended up, decent, and then the next year, the back and forth, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because as artists, our revenue varies so dramatically.
Yes, very true. That's a great question. So Sarah, as she said, the ARP funding was signed into law in March of 2021. So this funding is going to be a comparison of your 2019 income, so pre-pandemic, to 2021 income. So you're just going to be comparing your 2019 total income with your 2021 total income. So does that kind of make sense a little bit more? And Sarah, if you have anything else to add.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Eleanor.
Hi. So you mentioned that the artist grants are limited for artists working in Johnson County. Does the same apply for the art nonprofits grants? Do they have to be located in Johnson County?
Sarah, is that a yes?
Yeah, because this is money that's coming through Johnson County government, it does need to be for artists who live or work in Johnson County, and then the arts organizations will have to demonstrate that they have a space in Johnson County.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
One more quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have to have I live in Missouri, but my studio is in Kansas. Do I have to have a Kansas license? Kansas business license?
No, as long as you can prove that your studio address is in Johnson County, which it is. So yeah, you should be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Allison, I don't remember, were we clear that if you were an artist who applied for and received funding in 2020 for the COVID CARES Act grants, you can apply for this round of funding too?
Yeah.
And I see in the chat, Sandra was asking, I think along those lines. Sandra, did that answer your question? You asked, so this is not for artists in JOCO or new art businesses since 2021.
Correct.
All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, Suzanne.
So I understand about the income, but is that income from art specifically, or is it, I mean, if you had to go and get another job because you couldn't make it in art, is that, how do you fill it out for that?
That's a great
Um,
question. Sarah, go
And
ahead.
Allison, before you answer, I'm gonna say we don't know yet. And once we get a little more clarity from Johnson County government, we'll be more clear in the guidelines. I want to say, without answering specifically, I want to say in the 2020 round, we tried to be as broad and far reaching as we possibly could. So that a lot of things could qualify as income loss or revenue loss. And I think if we can do that again this year, we will certainly do that too, as long as we're in compliance with, federal and local guidelines. So I don't know, but we're going to try and do everything we can to make it broad reaching.
And Mark put in the chat, when will grants be awarded and distributed? And I think that's another one of those unclear quite yet what the timeline is. We have a very loose timeline. So we do not have an exact date for that. But if you sign up for our email newsletters, we will let you know as soon as we know. Sarah, in the chat, Brian put a good question in. He said, for the income requirement, what about projected growth in 2020 and 2021, i.e. growth in sales through those years that was offset by the losses resulting in similar numbers between 2019 and 2021? Do you have an answer for that one?
That is an excellent question. And I'm going to say, unfortunately, I don't know yet, but we'll get things more clear the closer we are to launching the program.
And then Smitha said, what are the supporting documents they'll need to show the income loss? Do we have an exact, do we know exactly what they're going to need to show yet?
I don't know that either. Again, I think the same way we approached it in 2020 was to try and be as broad as we could. So there will be, whether it's receipts, whether it's income statements, whether it's mortgages, rent, whatever contracts, anything at this point, I would say anything that can document and show that you were at a loss, without trying to be specific, because we don't know yet, which I know makes this a little bit maddening for everyone. The main thing is we wanted to let you all know that this is coming up, and to be watching for it. And again, we'll try and narrow things down and get more clear and specific the closer we are to launching the program. It's just now we're in that messy middle of understanding what all we need to report back to county government so they can report back to the federal government, and so that we're all in line and sharing what we need to share so that we're we don't have to come back and say, whoops, we made a mistake. So I apologize for not having a lot of the answers, but we're going to get there. And all of your questions are super helpful because that helps us then build our guidelines.
Yeah. All right. Any last minute questions? And then I think our time is up. And we'll move on to the next one. But if you have a question or think of something later on, feel free to drop it in the chat. We're going to stick around to answer questions. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Sarah Van Landite, Allison Bowman, thank you so much for getting us started. Brittany, I see you snapping. Next up, we have Amy Kligman, Executive and Artistic Director at Charlotte Street Foundation. Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, if I am going to try to do this slideshow, we'll see if it works or not. But if you could help me share screen.
Yeah, go for it.
There we go. All right, can y'all see that? And then the thing that I always do mess up is this business of trying to make this actually look like a slideshow. So, well, can you see, do you see a presentation versus a mess? Like,
Yes.
okay, right. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being a little patient with me with tech. It's not my favorite thing, but here we are. So I'm Amy Kligman. I'm with the Charlotte Street Foundation. So a little bit about Charlotte Street in general. This is our very long and wordy mission statement, but at our core, Charlotte Street is here to support Kansas City's contemporary art community, and specifically artists. Like, we're really an artist-centric artist services organization that's here to make Kansas City a place that artists want to be and live and work. We are especially about these 4 values. So we think a lot about risk, collaboration, openness, and excellence. And through a whole network of things that we provide, resources that we provide, these are values we're trying to help promote, in part because we believe these are things that help push artists forward in their practice. There are, in most of our grant opportunities and in most of our opportunities in general, rubrics associated with this or scorecards associated with this that get very detailed. But broadly, these are the kind of values that we're looking for in artists that we work with. The history of Charlotte Street is that we were inspired, or the organization was prompted by our founder, David Hughes, used to hang out on Charlotte Street at this artist house, John Pushek. And John was a painter, but he also was just really into supporting his community. He hosted musicians at his house. He hosted artists at his house. People had food. It was very much like a peer care network where basically like artists were helping artists. So that is sort of at the very core of what Charlotte Street is. This has evolved over time. We began in 1997 as an or a grant making institution. It was just grants at that time. And specifically the Charlotte Street Award, which was for visual artists. And it started off being just like a $2,000 grant. It was a nomination process. It was money that just sort of showed up in people's mailboxes. And to some degree, they didn't even know where it came from or like what it was about. There were checks that went lost or got thrown away the very first couple of years because people were like, who is giving artists money? What is this? And now, of course, you know, 25 years later, a much more established program, and the processes are a lot more rigorous now. So I'll kind of get into that, what the grant processes are. Broadly, I do want to say we support artists a lot of ways, not just grants. So grants are critical to the mix of things that we do, but we do also provide we have a residency program. So we have about 30 artist residency studios, and they're free. So it's a juried process. If you get in, it's free for 2 years. We also have a gallery, an exhibition space, and a theater, and a library. So there's a lot of other resources on site as well. But we're focusing on grants today, so I'll try to stick with that. So awards, perhaps the first or the primary award that Charlotte Street was known for is the Charlotte Street Visual and Generative Performing Awards. Again, it started off as just the visual awards, and then later on we added the Generative Performing Awards. We give 5 of these awards away a year. So it's 3 visual artists and 2 performing artists. Performing category is pretty broad. That's like everything from musicians, dancers, puppeteer, circus performer, like really broad interpretation of like whatever performance could be, but it does need to be generative, meaning like the work should be original new work. So again, in like a theater space, that sometimes gets tricky. We're kind of looking for people that are presenting work that they're generating on their own. Kansas City metro area. So Johnson County is eligible. Anybody in Johnson County is eligible for these grants. And I should say for the visual awards, there is also an exhibition associated with that. This year, the recipients are having an exhibition at the Nerman in the fall. So it's always a museum quality exhibition space. It kind of moves around, but this year it's with the Nerman. These are this year's awards recipients. We actually just announced this. The process starts in the fall. So look for those applications to kind of go out. It's usually like October, November that they're out in the world. And then we bring in jurors from all over the country to weigh in on this. It's not Charlotte Street folks or well, there's one local person usually involved in that jury pool. But it changes every year. It's always different people making those decisions. And so anyway, this year, these are the Charlotte Street Award recipients: Ruben Castillo, Sen Young Park, Sean Nash, Stefan Singleton, and Tiara Nicole were this year's grantees that were just announced a couple of weeks ago. So we're really excited and always happy to have a reason to talk about these folks and the great work they're doing. We do look for a lot of diversity in the performance and the geography and the backgrounds of folks that receive these awards, looking to make sure that that is representative of, kind of Charlotte Street's whole artistic community. Another grant that Charlotte Street is well known for is the Rocket Grants. Rocket Grants is a grant that we do in partnership with the Spencer Museum of Art in Lawrence, and also it is wholly funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Arts. It's a re-granting program. We were one of the first 3 organizations to be a part of this re-granting program like 13 years ago or so. And now there's something like 50 organizations around the country in different geographies that are a part of this. And we're sort of linked to all of them. This award is for public facing work in non-traditional spaces. So it's not about work happening in art galleries. This is a visual art focused award, although I will say like that again is interpreted very broadly. We've had dancers, theater performers, poets like work their project in such a way that it has like a visual component, and that makes it eligible for this award. So just to put that out there. These grants are $6,000 each. The visual and performing awards are $10,000. This is a $6,000 grant. And the applications open in the spring, usually in April. So this one is kind of coming up. And recipients are announced in September. So, and I think, I know we have a Rocket grantee and actually a visual award grantee on the call. So yay to folks that have done this before. Current Rocket Grant Award recipients, just to kind of give you a sense of like the breadth of the kinds of things that are granted. So Kansas City Rainbow Tour, which is an audio tour related to LGBTQIA history in Kansas City, got an award last year. Natives Now, which is a public art project by Mona Cliff in Lawrence. She's doing like workshops and murals and all this kind of related to Indigenous art in, again, the Lawrence area. Neighborhood Heroes, which is another mural project Devin Edwards is doing on the east side. Closure is Not Justice is Andrew Johnson, Asia Edwin, and Brian Shepard, who are working on, it's actually like a reflection on a case of, there were 5 folks that were implicated and then incarcerated due to a fire that happened in the Manheim Park neighborhood a long time ago. It was like in the 70s, I think. But their whole project is sort of an investigation of what happened. Brian Shepard is one of the incarcerated folks that was released, and he's a part of the project. So it's a really interesting look at how that happens. Spoken Easy is a project, it's a group of poets on the east side, and they do these like sort of house parties that are also poetry focused. And that's John Lewis. I'm So Glad is a documentary series about gospel and its relationship to jazz in Kansas City. Only the Wounds and Weapons Have Changed is actually it's actually a theater production, but what is happening is they're taking it into libraries and doing these kind of pop-up things that are very visual. Corazine, Brittany's here. Congratulations again, Brittany, on getting some funds for CORE, which is a publication that's focused on artists and art in the Kansas City area. Snapping Back is a kind of pop-up performative art installation by Kelly New and Fernell Fristo that's centered on trans and LGBTQ experience. And then Art Moves is a podcast that is kind of centering artists, talking about artists in the Kansas City area, and kind of giving some voice and some feedback around like art criticism and art like just interviews and that kind of thing. So again, a really wide variety of the kinds of projects that get Rocket Grant funding. But it is a lot about art happening in unexpected spaces, risk-taking art, a lot of art that like is thinking about social issues. And again, these are $6,000 grants. And then right now, we actually have a grant opportunity that just opened a little while back called Cultural Producer Grants. This has an old date on it, so don't pay attention to that date. The new date is actually March 20th. So these are open now and due soon. So Cultural Producers is a grant that is given to artists, but it's artist-run organizations and artist-run initiatives. So collectives, kind of startups, like artist-run art spaces or groups. And the groups that have gotten this most recently, so last year it was Boone Area 1, which is kind of a green space on the east side. Strange Fruit Femmes, which is that African American artists collective that's focusing on femme like learning and workshops. Tribe Studio Incubator, which is Eddie Moore's like incubator space for musicians. Curiouser and Curiouser, which is a small artist-run space. It's actually it's like a little shipping container gallery, and then they have an actual gallery space in Strawberry Hill. And then Harriet's Herbal Hub, it says club, I'm pretty sure it was hub, Harriet's Herbal Hub, which was a kind of pop-up art space and medicinal sort of learning space that was happening over on Troost in collaboration with Uzazi Village. So those were the most recent ones, but again, with Cultural Producers, it's really about like artists who have ideas, who are trying to get things off the ground, that are like you have to have less than a $50,000 budget for these kinds of things. So once these organizations get big enough that they're having funding sources and, they're kind of on their way, they fall out of eligibility for this. But it's really about those very, very small grassroots sort of initiatives that are started by artists that are super critical to the community, that often just don't have the sort of support they need to sustain themselves. So that is Cultural Producers, and that is it actually for my little slideshow. I'll stop sharing. Does anybody have questions about those things? Those are the grants. We do a lot of other stuff, but this is kind of like the focus of what we're talking about now.
I see Wyatt's had a question in the chat, and then Alonzo, I see you raising your hand. So Wyatt asked Lawrence artists included, and I think that was answered, but could you give us an idea of like what is the range in general?
Yeah, thank you. I can say a little bit more about that. Lawrence artists are included for some of our opportunities, not all. So Rocket Grants is eligible for Lawrence artists. For Rocket Grants, it's an 80-mile radius. And because we partner with the Spencer in Lawrence, like Lawrence artists are eligible for that one. Lawrence artists are not eligible for the visual award or the generative performing award. That is like the Kansas City Metro 5-county area. And same for Cultural Producers. So hopefully that answers your question there. And then Alonzo, I saw your hand was up. What was your question too? Oh, can't hear you. Oh, do you want to try it in the chat? Okay. Sorry. It's good to see you though. Alonzo got a grant a while back too. Okay, well, any other questions? Oh yeah, Eleanor.
Hi, I was wondering with the Cultural Producer Grant, just kind of if you could just elaborate a little bit on the priorities, like what you're looking for in organizations, and also whether the grants are just for operational funding or if you prefer to see a project.
Yeah, good questions. For cultural producers, it really is about general operations funding. And the reason for that is that so much of the grant opportunities for organizations that are this small are project-based. And we know that like just keeping the doors open is actually the thing that takes these little bitty guys down, right? So so it is Gen Op. You don't have to you don't even have to send in a report. It's just kind of about these funds are there to kind of keep you going. And what was the other part of the question?
Just kind of what you're
The
looking
priority.
for in the organizations that you're funding. Is it like the number of artists that they'll serve? Is it
Yeah.
anything else?
That's a good question. We do kind of back it up against the value system that we put up at the very beginning. So that risk, collaboration, openness, and excellence. So we are looking for like organizations that are taking risks, that are like sort of pushing the envelope of like what exists already in Kansas City. So it's a little bit of like who's trying something new, who's pushing something forward. Collaboration is pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, we do look for like impact through collaboration, like who all is being touched by this. It doesn't necessarily mean the person with the biggest audience wins, but it does mean like we want to see that you're making an effort to engage with the community. Openness is actually like openness was a word we settled on, I want to say like 6 years ago, but like if we were redoing that whole exercise now, it probably would have ventured more towards inclusion. It's really about like who's a part of what you're doing. Are you paying attention to people coming from lots of different perspectives? And how are you going about like engaging with the community? And then excellence. Excellence is always a tricky word and a tricky thing to quantify. For us, the way that we do that, to be clear with folks, we are always changing who's making these decisions. It's never people at Charlotte Street. It's always jurors that we bring in from the community, but also outside of the community to kind of like change that up. And then we're asking people to think about like, who surprises you the most? Who are you the most excited about? Who's doing something that feels fresh and new? Who's really having an impact in a way that, you know, you can kind of see. And also like who's doing something again, like the most distinctive. It feels exactly like it's theirs. Like, you know, you don't see it replicated all that much in the like environment that we're in already. So if that gives people a kind of sense of what we're looking for or what we're talking about, I think we're definitely trying to promote artists, again, like advancing their work. It just kind of comes down to that. The grants for, sorry, there's another question. The grants for individual.
And I was going to say, Alonzo had his hand raised to try again.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Alonzo. Did you come back with were you able to figure it out, Alonzo, the sound?
Yeah, it's saying, it's my mic's unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
What I was saying, I was just going to testify, quick testimony, just to show you what she's talking about. I was a young artist one day, not anymore, but I remember how I learned about the Charlotte Street Fund was I was doing an interview about being a young artist that was a rebel, mistrustful of probably everything. And they called me up because they saw me in an interview and said, you should apply. And I was like, I'm not going to apply for this. They called me again. And I finally went and applied. And because, you know, I was doing a comic book with social messages, working on putting action figures out that I finally was able to do. And they approached me. I was very mistrustful, wasn't going to do it, but it was real. So just letting those artists out there that might think this organization is not like that. It's really that, no cap. So that's all I was saying.
Thank you, Alonzo. I appreciate that testimony. And then I saw one more question in the chat about the grants for individual artists, and it opens again. Yeah, it opens in the fall. So it's usually kind of like October, November, you'll see the application go out. And yeah, it's the 5-county region of Kansas City, Missouri. So I'm trying to remember all the counties offhand, but yes, Kansas City, Missouri is the focus for that grant. Yeah. Okay, I probably took up plenty of time, Wolf, but that's probably
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And we give grace. I mean, you know, we're not like, thank you, Amy. That was awesome. We'll move on now to Tara Kareem with Arts KC.
Hi, everyone. I also have a presentation. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Yes, okay. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about Arts KC's grant making. I am the program manager of grants, and like Charlotte Street, we also don't only do grants, but that's what I do at Arts KC, and that's obviously what I'll be talking about today. I'm going to talk about Arts KC really briefly and our grant making program generally. And I'll talk about all of our grants, but I'll try to focus the most on inspiration, since I'm sure that's what you're most interested in. Those are our grants for individual artists. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about application tips and our evaluation process as well. So Arts KC, we are a nonprofit arts organization. We provide support for the regional arts and culture community through programs, advocacy, and investment. Some of our programs that you might have heard of, obviously grant making, but you might have heard of our Now Showing program. I think I saw some Now Showing artists on the call. We also do a lot of advocacy for the arts. Like Amy, we serve a 5-county region. So we serve Clay, Platte, Jackson, Johnson, and Wyandotte. And our mission is advancing lives through the arts. A big part of what Arts KC does is we try to improve the lives of our region through arts. We focus on community development through the arts, health and wellness, education. We support artists, and we also support artists supporting the community, I would say. As far as grant making, obviously grants are investments. We invest in people, programs, and projects that make the arts more accessible, sustain a vibrant arts community, and recognize excellence, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the arts. And just to give you an idea of the size of our grant making program, last year we gave out around $400,000 to 69 organizations and 24 individual artists. Some things that we tend to prioritize for organizations, 70% of the organizations that got a grant were small to mid-sized. We count that as a budget of $500,000 or less, which may seem big, but a lot of those small to mid-sized orgs are smaller than that. And we do have some bigger than that apply and get grants as well too. And 30% of those organizations were diverse led. And so like Charlotte Street, we have other programs outside of grant making, and we're what you would consider an intermediary funder. So we are not a foundation. We don't have an endowment of funds that we give out. We raise all the money that we give out each year. So a lot of the funds that we give out are from grants. They're re-granting funds. We also try really hard through our advocacy department to get public funds. So this year we gave out some money from Jackson County and from Kansas City, Missouri. And we do give out some funds from private donations, but the majority of our funds that we gave out last year were re-granted funds. And being an intermediary funder is always interesting, but also kind of cool because we work alongside a lot of the organizations that we fund. We support the artists that we fund in other ways too. So I think being an intermediary funder is kind of cool because we're on the ground. We're working with our organizations that we fund. We hear what the community needs and we can adjust our grant programs accordingly. So it's an interesting place to be in, and we do kind of have to hustle to raise all the funds that we can give out, but it's kind of a cool place to be too. Okay, So as far as our grants, we've had 3 grant programs that have been around since 2007. And those are mission support, project support, and inspiration. Our mission support grants are our biggest category. Last year, we gave out $255,000 in that category, 51 grants with an average grant size of about $5,000. And these are grants for nonprofit organizations with arts as their primary purpose. They have to be in our 5-county region. And these are unrestricted funds or general operating support. And that's why this tends to be our biggest category, because we prioritize those unrestricted funds. We know that that's the biggest need. And these are currently closed. We're announcing our final grant recipients for this year, probably next week or the week after. Project support grants, on the other hand, are also for nonprofit organizations, but they don't have to be arts organizations or have a primary purpose in the arts. They just have to have arts projects, programs, or activities. Last year, we gave out $86,000 in this category, 18 grants, average grant size about $4,800. This one, the deadline is coming up next week, pretty quick. And then our inspiration grants, which are the ones you're probably most interested in. These are our individual artist grants or small groups of artists. The highest priority for these grants are projects. So this is a project grant, and we prioritize projects of risk, growth, and change for the artist, and or projects that make a positive impact on the community. So we're looking for projects that are either going to take you to the next step in your career or be transformative for your artist practice somehow, and or something that will make a positive impact in the community. And any discipline is open to apply for these or eligible to apply. Last year, we gave out 24 grants at $2,500 each. And this grant is open right now. The deadline's in a month. So it could be something that you could still look at. We are offering a workshop in a couple weeks that focuses on the budget. For those of you who know Chris Dahlquist, you might have seen her in other presentations. She's amazing. She has a really great way of explaining how to turn your project into a budget that makes sense to artists. And it's also kind of speaks to how to put together a grant application in general. I really encourage you to, if you want to apply, check this workshop. Wow, check this workshop out. She's an amazing speaker. She takes the time to answer your questions, and she's worked with a lot of artists in the community. So should be worth your time. That QR code hopefully takes you to the Eventbrite if you want to sign up. It's free and it's virtual. We'll also record it. So if you can't make it, still sign up, and then I'll send out the recording afterwards. Any questions about the inspiration grant before I keep going? I don't know if I can keep going too. I don't know where the questions are on my screen on the chat. I don't think there have been any. Okay, I'll keep going. So another grant we just opened last year is our Terry Rogers Filmmakers Grant. I don't know if any of you knew Terry Rogers. She passed away in 2018 and was just a transformational leader in production in Kansas City. When she passed away, we started a fund in her honor. And last year, we were able to give away the inaugural grant for this category. And these are filmmaker grants for women or gender non-conforming early career directors, creating new film, video, digital production work in the short film narrative genre. So since this fund is predominantly from private donations, and it's really in the legacy of Terry Rogers, it's very specific. It's also bigger for us. It's a $10,000 grant. And that's, also because films are they tend to be bigger budget projects. And this will open again. We're aiming for April. So if you have any filmmakers that would be eligible, spread the word. I just wanted to application tips too. So for those of you who might be applying for a grant for the first time or to kind of sharpen your skills, one tip that I think is a good one is to always reach out to the funder if you have questions. For one, I think asking a question can give you clarity on that question, but can also clarify some other intentions of the grant. And I think it's just a great practice to not do any guesswork when you're applying. Like if you're unclear about something, just reach out, get that clarification. Also, when you're writing, be clear, specific, and persuasive. Like Charlotte Street at SKC, we always try to get artists on the evaluation committee. So you can definitely talk about your art and don't feel like you have to dumb it down or anything. But also, you know, it should be persuasive writing where you're really trying to convince the committee that your project is a good fit for the funding. So be clear, be specific. Any points of confusion for the committee can kind of work against you. I've seen it happen where committees are like, wait, here they say, you know, their project alone, but over here it says they're going to hire an assistant. But in the budget, I don't see anything about an assistant. So what are they, you know, anytime that they have to say, oh, I was clear about that part too, then it can kind of work against you in the process. So make sure you totally paint a picture of what your project is for the committee and be very, very clear and specific. Always answer all parts of the question too. So you don't have to be overly verbose. You can be concise, but you know, take every opportunity to explain fully, I would say. And also utilize any resources that are given. I know Arts KC and Charlotte Street both have great websites with a lot of great info on there. Make sure to read through the eligibility criteria, the evaluation criteria, and have a good sense of that before you dig in. Okay. I hope I'm not going too long. The last thing I just wanted to say was about our evaluation process, which sounds pretty similar to Charlotte Street's. We also put together a committee of volunteers. We focus on local committee members. We usually get artists. For inspiration, it's mostly artists. For our organizational grants, we also try to get some people with a financial background and a community development background. And each grant has a little bit different criteria. So if you have questions about the other ones, let me know. But for inspiration, we're looking at artistic achievement and quality, career and community impact, and feasibility and budget. So that's where that budget workshop comes in. And also on our website, we have the evaluation forms that the committee uses to score each application. So check that out, you know, set it next to your application and make sure you're answering all the right questions and meeting those criteria. Okay, that's all I have. I see one question in the chat. The artwork theme topic for an inspiration grant have to focus on the 5-county area? Oh, good question. No, not necessarily. So the way I think we phrase it is that the artist, for inspiration, the artist has to live or work in the 5-county region. Let me just double check. So you have to live in the 5-county region. Applications from adjacent counties will be considered if the project takes place within our service area, but the 5-county region is the main priority. So we've had artists from Cass County or Douglas County apply as long as the project takes place in the service area. But we've also had artists who live in the 5-county region apply for a project that might take place elsewhere, but since they live in the 5-county region, they're eligible. Does that help?
I
me
had
stop
a
sharing this screen too.
I had a
Go ahead.
question. Are fiscally sponsored organizations eligible for the nonprofit grants?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I need to be, when you apply, one of the first questions it asks is, do you have a fiscal sponsor? And you would input that information. But it's
Yeah.
not very clear on the website. I think it could be more clear about that. But yes, yeah.
Thank you.
So another question in the chat, for example, could an application with a focus on historic quilt designs have to focus on quilt designs from the Kansas City area? No. No. It's just that the artist has to either live in our 5-county region, or if they don't, then some part of the project has to take place in Kansas City. But yeah, it doesn't have to be Kansas City centric necessarily. Where would we go to apply for the Inspiration Grant? So here is a link to the Inspiration page. And on there, if you click on how to apply, there's a link to the online grant system. And if you haven't applied before, you do have to create an account. So if you want to check out the application before you do all that, there's a PDF of the application on the website under how to apply. So you can kind of look at the questions and make sure it's something you want to do before you go into the system and create an account. The system is, from what I've heard, it's pretty easy to use. I don't think it was always that way, but I've heard it's pretty user-friendly now. I don't get very many complaints about it. So hopefully that's not a deterrent, but if you have any issues with it, let me know. I can usually help. Okay.
Tara, Lindsay's had her hand up. Like, if you want to unmute yourself
I
and ask.
apologize. Sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, no worries. I just had a question about the Terry Rogers filmmaking grant. I was just curious, does the film need to be at a particular stage in production, or can it be in any stage of production? Or is it just for the filmmaker to expand on their works in general?
It is for a specific project.
Okay.
And let me double check before I tell you.
Okay.
The film process, I've been learning a lot about it through this grant, but I can't speak totally confident yet. But I think the idea is that it's a film that you're going to make, and the funds themselves are for production.
Okay.
So what was your question again? Let me make sure I'm answering it.
No, that's okay. I guess I'm curious if part of the film has been captured, but it's at a certain stage in the process, can that film be submitted for this grant, or should it start from the earliest stage of treatment?
That's okay. Yeah, great question.
Stages.
I think if one part of it is made, that's okay, because the wording I'm looking at is this funding is meant to support the process of production or post-production.
Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So if you have part of it made, that's something that you could even put in the application to show the committee, and I think they'd appreciate that. And Lonita Cook, who's here, could speak to that too. She was on our grant committee last year, which was a really cool process.
Hi, Lonita.
So we've got a few more questions for you, Tara. Are you all right if we save that for after, so that Lonita can go ahead and present, and then we'll come back to the two questions. Anthony, Mark, and James, you asked a question as well. We'll come back to that afterwards. Thank you, Tara. That was super informative. I'll go ahead and move on to Lonita Cook. Hi, Lonita.
Hi, good morning, or is it afternoon now? Good afternoon. I don't have a super huge presentation. I'm Lonita Cook. I'm the East Central Kansas field rep for the Kansas Department of Commerce Creative Arts Industry Commission. And what we do is invest in arts-based nonprofits in the state of Kansas through granting opportunities. And we focus on categories, public art, theater, film, dance. And we have, 5 grant categories that you can apply for. Our grants are currently open. That deadline is coming up pretty quick, March 13th. And I can tell you what the field reps do. What we do is make sure that our arts-based nonprofits are resource ready through program audits, and we help you through the proposal rewrite process if needed. Let's see. So what that can look like, it can look like a few different things. So say, for instance, you have a concept, but you don't know which grant category it's most appropriate for. You can reach out to your field rep and we'll help you place that program in a grant category. Say, for instance, you already put your proposal in, but you want to see where it's at in the process. You can reach out to us and we will talk you through basically any of your questions. Now, if you put in your proposal and it goes through the process and it's declined, you can bring that proposal to us and we will help you with rewriting the proposal if you really, really want to move forward with it, and then we can resubmit together. So let's see. You can find the grants at kansascommerce.gov, and most of our grants are $7,500. We have the Innovative Partnership, which is $20,000. That grant category, that grant and Reimagine Spaces does require LOI. So those deadlines are also March 13th. So if you want to apply for either of those, I'd go ahead and get that LOI in because it needs to be approved before you can put in the proposal. We have a maximum of how much grant money you can have open at one time. So if you are a returning grantee and you have a grant open from the previous year or the year before, and you want to apply for another grant this year, all of those together can only total $20,000. I hope I said that in a way that makes sense. And if you do have grants open from previous years, and this grant will put you over the 20, you can go ahead and close those previous grants out and be okay. That's all I got. I sent James, I sent email to you. We did an info session a couple weeks back. I'd like just to put that information in the chat. I'm on my phone, so I'm not going to be able to do that, but I can take any questions.
Also, I'll say if you have any questions, please use the hand raise reaction, just because we may not be able to see you visually. There's so many folks on the call.
Yeah.
Or just unmute and start talking.
So Kansas only, that's one I see in the chat. Oh, I also saw LOI, letter of intent. Okay, so Kansas only. The short answer is yes, but say, for instance, you are applying for our organizational mentorship category, and and you are the mentee organization, and you want an out-of-state organization to be your mentor organization. We would be able to still fund a project with an out-of-state mentor organization. So there are some, so yes, Kansas organizations, but there are some exceptions.
Wyatt asked individual artists, question mark.
So we are focused on investing in arts-based nonprofits right now. Our touring artist roster is where we are currently investing in individual artists. And so what that looks like is our arts-based nonprofits who write proposals and include our touring artists. They can receive increased funds for using our touring artists.
I see James and then Lindsay.
We figured it out. Phil here has a question.
Hi, what is the deadline to become a touring Kansas artist?
Now that's a good question. And I'm not super sure, but let me look and see if I have that, if I can pull that up real quick. I was just looking at it yesterday, so let me see. And while I look it up, we can go to the next question. I'll come back to it.
Hi, yes, I just had a quick question. I remembered reading about reimagined spaces and wondered if you could just speak a little bit to the matching requirements and whether those have changed or if they're the same.
That's a great question. So the matching requirements as of right now are still the same. So it's a 1-to-1 match. And to be clear, the match is how much you spend, not necessarily how much you have or raise. It's how much you spend. And it is 75% can still be, because of COVID, 75% can still be in kind, where 25% has to be cash.
Thank you.
Of course, of course.
Let's say I'll get my tambourine and play some hold music.
Right. Yeah, so the visiting artist one, this is the one unfortunately that I'm least knowledgeable about because it's, I think a particular field web kind of works on that. We each kind of work on specific things. So like I'm working specifically on film, another one works specifically on dance, theater, and so on and so forth. And so let me see if I can find that for you.
Allison did some digging. It says applications for inclusion to the roster will open the summer of 2023.
Hard to look up and talk at the same time. So
Yeah.
I got you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We're all here to support each other. All right. Are there any more questions?
I had a question, Wolf.
Oh, do you want to ask that question, James?
I guess so.
All right.
If I were an individual artist and I had so it sounds like most of KCAIC's grants support nonprofit organizations. If I were an artist and had a nonprofit fiscal sponsor, could I apply for any one of those grants or not so much?
I'm going to say yes. And so I will say, I will be transparent and say a lot of kind of what we do is fluid. We want to make sure that we're supporting as many people and investing as much as possible. One thing that I've been saying pretty consistency is we really do want to make access to our grants easier. We're not wanting to withhold the money. And so in the past, I've told individuals that if you had a fiscal sponsor, it was okay to do that. And so when I say things are fluid, some things that I've said in the past have changed. As of right now, as far as I know, that's still true. Yes.
Thank you.
Of course. Was there a question in the chat that I missed?
Yes,
Yes.
from Mark.
Okay, let me see here. Hey, bear with me, I am on my phone. Oh.
I think it's a just clarification on nonprofit only, no individual artists.
Right, right, yes. Yes.
All right. I think we've done it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is a lot of information, a lot of super useful information. Oh, someone's got a. Oh, it's just you're welcome, Susan. If anybody, presenters, if you have time to stick around after, if anybody has any extra questions, I know, Tara, there were a couple questions that were needing to be addressed. If you've got time, or if you were able to already answer them. Yeah, feel free. We'll stay on for a little bit longer if people want to stay in and chat a bit. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, I answered a couple questions in the chat. Were there some outstanding questions outside of that too?
I think those were probably it. We might want to share with everyone just in case they didn't see the answers in the chat.
Sure. So Anthony asked, at what point in an artist's career should they feel confident about submitting their grant proposal for inspiration? Are grant funds allocated to a range of artists? And Allison actually jumped in and said she applied as a very emerging artist a few years ago and was awarded a grant. So thank you for sharing, Allison. So she encouraged emerging artists to apply, and I agree. I saw a lot. I also just noticed in Amy's presentation that some of the artists that have gotten her awards have also gotten inspiration grants before. So I think there are a lot of emerging artists that get inspiration grants, and it can be kind of catalytic for them and help them enter the next stage of their practice. So I would agree. And we also have some projects that are big and they're not what you would consider emerging artists. So I would agree that there's a range there and that our evaluation process is friendly to all stages of the career of the artist. And then Mark asked to look at a slide, and I put the presentation in there. So if anyone wants to check out the presentation again, you can. I also encourage you to check out the website. There's a lot of great resources on there too. And if you think of something later, you can always email grantmaking@artskc.org. Shoot me a question. I'm pretty good about responding. This is a great question for Amy too. Finding free, affordable studio space is my current priority. Do grants tend to cover this? That's an interesting question for inspiration because, I would have to say that it depends on what you're applying for. So if your project requires studio space, then you could definitely put studio space in the budget. But, just applying for studio rent wouldn't really be an arts project. So it would have to be part of the project that you're applying for. Amy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, so we have kind of a couple ways we would address studio needs. One is that we do have a studio residency program and that's entirely free. So it's like an application process to get a studio residency here. And that's one way we support studio space. There would also be eligibility, I would think, within cultural producers, if an artist was trying to run a studio space with other artists or something like that might be eligible for a cultural producer grant. And then let's see, when it comes to like our Charlotte Street Awards, those are unrestricted cash grants. So you can actually spend those on anything. They're not project-based grants. So those grants are really to like support your practice in any way that makes sense. Like you can go to the dentist with those grants, and we don't ask you how you spend it. So those are those. And then are the studio spaces at Charlotte Street open studios? I'm not sure. Sandra, what do you mean by open studios?
Sorry, I meant, is it like an open space or are
No.
they individual studios?
That's a good question. They used to be in our new building. They're all closed door studios. So, yeah, we have spaces that you can lock.
Susan, actually first, Amy, I noticed that you posted charlottestreet.org e-blast sign up is the best way to get grant announcements when applications are open. And I just reposted that. And then Susan Ferguson had a comment. I received an inspiration grant for equipment related to an exhibit early on in my artistic endeavors, and it was indeed helpful in moving my career forward. Just a little testimony there.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan, for sharing.
All right, everybody. I think we've done it. Unless anybody has any last minute anything. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. This was great. Hopefully we'll do it again next year.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for informing us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You have a good day.